The 400-pound grizzly bear's claws tore through my chest like paper. Blood was everywhere. My ribs were crushed, and I was 50 miles away from the nearest hospital. But that was just the beginning of my nightmare. Hello. Today, I'm going to tell you about the most terrifying moment of my life. My name is Marcus Thompson. I'm 34 years old and I've been a professional wildlife photographer for 10 years. I photograph Alaska's wilderness, and I do this job with passion. Bears, wolves, eagles. I've shot them all. But that day, the photo I took in Denali National Park almost became my last photo. Everything started on the morning of September 15th. It was cold, about 28 degrees Fahrenheit. I was alone in the depths of Denali, 50 miles away from the nearest settlement. I only had my camera, my backpack, and basic survival equipment. That morning, I had left camp at 6 a.m. to capture the perfect grizzly bear photograph. At 9:30 a.m., I saw her. A magnificent female grizzly bear, about 660 pounds, with beautiful brown fur. But, most importantly, she had 2 cubs with her. Twin cubs were following their mother while playing. This photo was going to be the pinnacle of my career. I stood about 500 feet away from the bear, safe distance. I adjusted my telephoto lens and started shooting. The mother bear was trying to catch salmon, and the cubs were imitating her. It was a perfect family scene. This is where I made my first mistake. I started moving slowly forward to get a closer shot. From 500 feet to 400 feet, then down to 300 feet. The mother bear had noticed me but didn't seem to consider me a threat. She continued fishing. At 10:15 a.m., I made my second mistake. My camera's memory card was full. I opened my backpack to insert a new card. During this time, I didn't notice that the wind had changed direction. Now my scent was going directly to the mother bear. While changing the memory card, I heard a very faint sound. When I lifted my head, my world changed. The mother bear was running toward me at full speed. The cubs had been left behind. Grizzly bears can run at 35 miles per hour. I was only 300 feet away. It was impossible for me to escape. I tried to get my bear spray, but it was too late. Within seconds, she was on me. The first blow knocked me to the ground. You can't imagine a 400-pound mass lunging at you. I couldn't breathe. The bear's weight was crushing my ribs. But what was truly terrifying were her claws. Her left paw tore through my chest. It opened 4 deep wounds. Bleeding started immediately. Her right paw scraped my face. It opened a cut from next to my nose to my ear. The pain was unbearable, but I was in shock and couldn't feel anything. My survival training kicked in. First rule: play dead during a grizzly attack. I lay face down, clasped my hands behind my neck, spread my legs. I tried to stay as motionless as possible. The mother bear stayed on top of me for another 30 seconds. She took my head in her mouth. I felt her teeth penetrate my skull, but they didn't pierce through. Then, she clawed my back. She tore apart my backpack. The contents scattered. Then, she stopped. She had heard her cubs' voices. She moved away from me and checked on her cubs. This was my only chance. but I couldn't move. The blood loss was too much. My head was spinning. The mother bear moved away with her cubs, but I was in bad shape. The wounds on my chest were very deep. My second and thick ribs were broken. The cut on my face was bleeding. But worst of all, I was going into shock. First, I needed to stop the bleeding. Among the remnants of my backpack, I found my first aid kit. Fortunately, it hadn't been torn apart by the bear. It contained medical gauze, bandages, and antiseptic. I applied pressure to the wounds on my chest. This is a life-saving technique. If you put gauze on a wound and apply strong pressure, the bleeding slows down. I wrapped them tightly with bandages. The pain was unbearable, but it was essential to live. I also cleaned the wound on my face. The risk of infection was very high. I cleaned it with antiseptic and covered it with gauze. I was seeing with only one eye because my left eye was swollen. It was 11 a.m. The sun was rising, but it was still cold. I needed to be careful against hypothermia. Blood loss lowers body temperature. I put on my spare clothes and took out my sleeping bag. Now it was time for the hardest decision. Would I stay here and wait to be rescued, or would I try to walk? Nobody knew my exact location. Rescue teams couldn't find me. I had to walk. But in which direction? My GPS had been broken in the bear attack. I had a compass and map. The nearest road was 12 miles north. Under normal circumstances, a 4-hour walk. But in my condition, it could take 8 to 10 hours. At 11:30 a.m., I started walking. Every step was painful. My ribs made breathing difficult. But stopping meant death. I would take 20 steps and rest, then another 20 steps. In the first hour, I could only advance 800 meters. The bleeding had stopped, but weakness was increasing. I needed to drink water, but my stomach was nauseous. This was the effect of being in shock. The second hour became even more difficult. I had left the bear area, but there were other dangers. Wolverines, cougars, wolf packs. In my wounded state, I would be easy prey. I was constantly checking my surroundings. At 2 p.m., I took my first major break. I found a small stream. I needed to boil the water, but I didn't have the strength to make a fire. I used my water purification tablets. I waited 30 minutes and drank. My body desperately needed water. During this break, I also checked my wounds. The wounds on my chest were still bleeding, but not much. The swelling on my face had increased. I continued to see with one eye. I looked for signs of infection, but there weren't any yet. The afternoon walk became even more difficult. The sun was starting to set, and it was getting cold. At night in Alaska, it could drop to 23 degrees Fahrenheit. The hypothermia risk was increasing. At 4:30 p.m., I took my second major break. I had covered 6 miles, halfway, but I was very weak now. My blood sugar had dropped. I had emergency snacks in my backpack. I ate energy bars and dried fruit. Meanwhile, I applied an important survival technique. To preserve body heat, I dressed in layers. Underwear, fleece, rain jacket. I covered my head and neck area because 40% of body heat is lost from here. At 6 p.m., there were 6 miles left. But darkness was falling. Walking at night was very dangerous. I could both get lost and encounter other wild animals. But stopping also meant death. I continued walking using my flashlight. I was taking a break every 50 steps. I was having trouble breathing. The ribs were compressing my lung. But I didn't give up. At 8:30 p.m., a miracle happened. I saw a light in the distance. Car headlights. I had reached the road. I tried to shout, but my voice wouldn't come out. I waved my flashlight. The car stopped. The man who got out froze. "My God, what happened to you?" he said. "Bear," I managed to say. "Hospital." The man immediately called 911. He took me into his car and drove toward the nearest town. I fainted on the way. The next thing I remember was the hospital room. The doctor was standing next to me. "You're miraculously alive," he said. "This is the first time I've seen someone take these wounds and walk 12 miles. I stayed in the hospital for 8 days. I received 47 stitches. 4 deep wounds on my chest, a long cut on my face, 2 broken ribs. But most importantly, I was alive. I didn't get an infection because I had cleaned my wounds properly. The doctor explained to me what had enabled my survival. First, playing dead had shortened the bear's attack. Second, I had immediately stopped the bleeding. Third, I had taken precautions against hypothermia. Fourth, I hadn't become dehydrated. This experience taught me many survival lessons. First lesson, when working alone in the wilderness, always inform someone of your location. Second lesson, carry bear spray but make sure it's accessible. Third lesson, first aid knowledge saves lives. Fourth lesson, don't panic. If you can think rationally, even while in shock, your chances of survival increase. Fifth lesson, never give up. 12 miles seemed very long, but it could be done step by step. After this incident, my respect for grizzly bears increased even more. A mother protecting her cubs is powerful in every living being. My mistake was getting too close to her territory. Today I still do photography, but I'm much more careful. I always stay at a safe distance. I always carry a fully equipped first aid kit with me. And I never go to very remote areas alone. This story taught me how fragile life is. Everything can change in a second. But with the right knowledge, composure, and determination, you can get out of even the most difficult situations. My advice to you is this. If you spend time in nature, learn basic survival techniques. Take a first aid course. Prepare an emergency bag. Because you never know when you might need it. Thank you for listening to me. If you learned something from this story, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. You can share your similar experiences in the comments section. See you in my next survival story. Take care of yourselves.